Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we are at the last phase, and this is the last session of the last phase, that is for phase 4. So the 20th lecture of our module, and today's topic, the IELTS speaking simulation, part 1, 2 and 3 and course finale. So we will be discussing on putting it all together, rapid personal question and answer, and the structured 2-minute monologue, mastering the abstract analytical discussion, final feedback from you, customized growth plans, and overcoming the last remnants of anxiety, how to overcome that. So today we are entering the final stage of phase 4, the grand finale. Over the last 19 classes, you have mastered advanced debate, crisis management, and syntactic evasion. You have dismantled your fear of speaking, right? আপনারা দূর করতে পেরেছেন, ভেঙে ফেলতে পারছেন আপনাদের যে ভয়, কথা বলার ভয়টা. So that's what I have experienced right now, that you successfully have dismantled your fear of speaking. Alhamdulillah. So, and you have rebuilt your grammatical foundations and learned how to control conversation, pivot away from ignorance, and tell cinematic stories. Now it is time to put all of these skills to the test in the ultimate arena of conversational stamina. The IELTS speaking simulation, part 1, 2 and 3. However, this class is not just about passing an exam. The skills required for IELTS part 1, rapid casual small talk that you did, and part 2, a structured uninterrupted 2-minute monologue, are the exact same skill required to build relationships at a networking event or deliver a project update in a corporate meeting. And in part 3 of IELTS exam, IELTS speaking test, in that segment, high-level corporate boardrooms, university thesis defenses, and global negotiation, you are no longer allowed to talk about you. You must talk about society. Okay, objective point. You need to present something from the objective point of view. What you actually do believe regarding that segment. It's not about you. You will not be allowed to talk about you. But you must talk about society, humanity, the future, and abstract concepts. So that is a phenomenon of part 3. To survive this, basic English is completely useless. You need the structures of intellectual authority. Today you will learn the advanced structural formation that separate basic conversationalists from elite, native level storytellers. You will master the time shift, contrast, the qualifying framework, the past perfect anchor, and participle clauses also. You will master the grammar of nuance, hedging, how to how to hedge it, right? So conceptual framing we discussed in the earlier classes, the casual chain, and inverted conditionals. So we discussed inverted conditionals also. So these are the things we have learned. We have learned so many things. Now we need to execute those things in our daily conversation, in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day talk, or wherever we'll be assigned to present, or we'll be in the boardroom to be interrogated, right? So we know each and every bites of speaking and the art of speaking. How can you answer simple personal questions without sounding basic? Now let's see some of these things that if we want to improve that basic answers, basic level of answers of that personal questions, how could we make that? We have been experiencing this sort of sample answers. So today we are presenting a few more. So in IELTS part 1, everyday talk, small talk, you are asked simple question: do you like reading, or what kind of music do you listen to? A basic speaker or answer linearly in the present tense. Yes, I like reading. I love reading. I read novels, like this way. This is grammatically right. This is grammatically correct, but structurally weak. It gives the examiner no opportunity to grade your advanced English. Elite speakers answer simple questions by creating a time shift. They contrast their past habits with their present reality. This automatically forces you to use complex grammar and proves your vocabulary is dynamic. So what would be the formula to do so? So first of all, your habitual past, your habit in the past, you'll be using this sort of verb, that is the modal. We used to would, then the noun or verb, then transition lexicon, and present perfect, present continuous tense. Like this way, that I like classical music. You could make this: during my formative years, I would exclusively listen to heavy metal. Okay, formative, earlier days. So you were in love with that heavy metals, and you are telling now. However, you have used that lexicon, transition lexicon, right? Here, see. However, okay. So this is the trans, transition lexicon. However, so now you are telling that present tense or present continuous tense or present perfect. Nowadays, I find myself gravitating toward classical music. So you are being asked, do you like music? And you are, see here the question, what kind of music do you listen to? You are being asked this question, what kind of music do you listen to? You could say, I like classical music, or I listen to classical music, but you could make it in a different way. You could take it in a different level, into a different level. You are saying that in past tense, you are making that what you actually used to like, and then now you have used that transition lexicon also. So you have equipped your sentence with so many things, right? So past, present, future, then another concept where we'll be speaking in that part 3. So during my formative years, I would exclusively listen to heavy metal. So that was in the past. Now what you're doing, so you are using the transition lexicon. However, nowadays I find myself gravitating. Gravitating means you are feeling attracted toward classical music. So you are using that word, gravitation, that gravitation force. You are feeling the gravitation force. That is the verb, gravitating. I find myself gravitating toward classical music. See how improved sentence it is? Okay. So transition of change. Learn these advanced phrases to glue your past and present together seamlessly. Say, just how will you make it? How can you actually execute this to glue your past with the present together and seamlessly without actually struggling? That is seamlessly. So however, as my tests have matured, I now like this way. This could be another phrase, or you could say, but recently I have completely shifted my focus to, or you could say, yet by presenting the past scenario, then you could add that, yet my current lifestyle dictates that I, like this way. I have given the sample sentences. You can see, in my earlier 20s, I would almost exclusively watch high budget action films. However, as my tastes have matured, I now find myself gravitating toward independent documentaries that explore complex social issues. See? Okay, another way, that is another example is given here. For years, I used to see how what modal I have used. I used to spend, and after this is the base form of the verb. Okay, I used to spend. For years, I used to spend my weekends scrolling aimlessly through social media, but recently, I have completely shifted my focus to reading historical biographies and listening to educational podcasts. Another way we could see is, when I was in my university, I would regularly stay up until the early hours of the morning socializing, yet, so you are using that transition lexicon, right? Yet, my current lifestyle dictates that I adhere to a strict sleep schedule in order to maintain peak professional performance. Okay, you are stick to. I add here, you are maintaining a strict sleep schedule in order to maintain peak professional performance. So this is how. Now another question. See, do you enjoy cooking? Do you enjoy cooking? So you could execute in that way. In my university days, I used to rely entirely on processed takeout food. However, as my tastes have matured, I have recently shifted my focus to preparing organic, home-cooked meals for scratch. See, apply the structure and you could see the uplifted sentences, right? So this is not difficult. Try to understand. I have given so many examples for you to get the thing in your mind and in your heart as you could execute this. So another question you see. So there I have given the options earlier. These three ways, or at least this I have given that but, recently, however, yet, this way. And now I have been answering with one example using one out of that three. Okay, so you could use that other also, the other structures, the other sentences that I have given for you in the last slide. So another question, what kind of holidays do you prefer? You were saying, when I was younger, I would always seek out chaotic, heavily populated tourist destinations. Yet, my current lifestyle dictates that I retreat to quiet, isolated nature reserves to decompress. So notice the mechanics. You turn a band 5 question into a band 8.5 or 9 or 8 plus simply by comparing two different timelines in one sentence. Right? Okay. So the it depends structure. How to avoid absolute statements and demonstrate high-level analytical thinking in casual Q&A, question and answer. You can do it by mastering the grammar of conditionality in rapid conversation. The core linguistic concept, try to understand that first. Basic speakers give absolute answer. Yes, I love the rain. Or no, I hate waking up early. Native speakers rarely give absolute answer. Okay, they condition their responses based on the environment, their mood, or the context. By using the qualifying framework, you prove to the examiner that you can navigate nuances, detailing. Okay, so this is the structure. Initial stance, your stance, and then make it dependent lexicon, make another complex sentence, and then after using that dependent lexicon, okay, like here I have used that if, and then variable A, after that whereas, conversely, and variable B. See, this is a very interesting structure. So I read books at night. Okay, I read books at night. This sentence, that is your answer. How could it would be in a different level? Okay, so what, like this way, I read books at night. Why? When do you read books? So these sentences could be uplifted by using that my reading habits are heavily dictated by my workload. See how actually nuanced you have used the nuance aspect. It depends on your workload. If you are having free time, or if you are having with your workload, you are going with your workload, then it differs. You did not mention just that is the absolute answer, that I love the rain. So it depends on the context, it depends on the situation, it depends on my mood. So don't give another the absolute answer. Try to make some sort of using that hedging and also the condition. So native speaker always use the condition. If they say actually which kind of cuisine do you like, we would say that Italian cuisine or like this way, and they would say it depends on the mood or the context or the environment or the weather. It depends. So like this way. So this is how we can make it. So first of all, the formula is initial stance. What is your initial stance? And then make a dependent lexicon, and then one variable and whereas another variable. See here, I read books at night. That's it. That means you don't read books in the morning or any time else except night. So that cannot be. That cannot be, right? So there would not be any definite answer of this sort of habits or this sort of. We do habits, and it is not based on a particular time or particular moment. It cannot be. So it has some sort of nuance expression. So how could you present that? And that would be exact, and that would be very highly maintained standard. So see, my reading habits are heavily dictated by my workload. If it's a relaxed weekend, I will devour a novel. Whereas on a stressful workday, I can barely manage a few pages. So this is how we could make it. The vocabulary of variables, memorize the phrases to introduce your conditions. They sound highly professional and native, right? So we need to memorize, we need to use these phrases in our sentences. If we can make this in our that sort of stock, if you could keep it in our stock, then we find it very convenient to use this sort of highly developed or constructed or structured sentences. Like this is the structure is or phrases is entirely contingent upon. That means completely depends on. So you could say completely depends. It completely depends on. Instead, you could say is entirely contingent upon. Like this way, my decision is to travel internationally for the holidays is entirely contingent upon my current professional workload and whether I have any pending projects deadline. It depends. So that you have said is entirely contingent upon. That means completely depends on. So have this sort of alternative phrases in your stock, right? Another way we could say, that is another phrases that we could use that fluctuates based largely on. It means changes depending on. Same, almost the synonymous way to present another phrases. Fluctuates based largely on. The amount of time I dedicate to reading for pleasure fluctuates based largely on the seasonal demands of my academic schedule. Another way we could say this is heavily dictated by, that means is controlled by. I have given the meaning here. You could see in the bracket, you will get the meaning that you will be getting in your mind. You will understand this sort of to represent this phrase. My morning routine is heavily dictated by whether I am scheduled to deliver an early lecture or if I have the rare luxury of a slow, unstructured start to the day. Like the way I maintain from Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Monday is I have the luxury of a slow, unstructured start of the day to the day. I wake up, I do some sort of, exercise, I take some food, some, elixir, and I do chit chat, and then I make a slow start, and then I go to university for giving my lecture later at 9:30 or 11. But on the other days, after having my prayer offered, I need to be on my toes to take this session or to conduct the morning session of my IELTS student. And after completing that, I need to do some sort of, that edit work. And then I need to do rush to prepare myself for my office. So this is how. You see here, my morning routine is heavily dictated by whether I'm scheduled to deliver an early lecture or if I have the rare luxury, that is the rare luxury, I have used that Monday. I have only that luxury, rare luxury of a slow and structured start to the day. Okay. I believe you have understood how to use this phrase. Okay, now another question. Do you prefer working alone or in a team? So how could you make it? My preference is entirely contingent upon the nature of the project. If the task requires deep analytical coding, I must work in absolute isolation. Okay, by myself, all alone. Conversely, if we are brainstorming marketing strategies, a collaborative environment is essential. See, there have some nuanced answer of every questions. There cannot be any definite answer. Okay, so I like in isolation. It cannot be. If you are in need to have your discussion session or teamwork, how would you do that work in isolation? So you have rightly said, my preference is entirely contingent upon the nature of the project. Okay, so another question, do you spend a lot of time on social media? See, every question we can make this sort of structure. So my screen time fluctuates based largely on my professional obligations. During a heavy lunch week, it's not lunch, you are having lunch, it's a lunch week. That means you have a lot of tasks to do. During a heavy lunch week, I'm completely offline. Whereas during a holiday, I tend to scroll quite mindlessly. So see, do you spend a lot of time on social media? We could say yes, not that much, like this way. But if you could make this sort of nuanced answer, like, yeah, it fluctuates, it depends. It based on, it's contingent. Like, it is entirely contingent upon the nature of the project. So any of the phrases you could use. Right. Architecting the 2-minute monologue. That is the part 2 of your IELTS speaking test. The past perfect anchor. Let's transitioning to IELTS part 2, the cue card. How to organize a spontaneous 2-minute story and use the past perfect tense to establish a powerful narrative backstory. So the challenge of the monologue in IELTS part 2, you are given a topic, like as for an example, describe a time you overcame a difficulty. And 1 minute to prepare, then you must speak alone for 2 minutes. Most students run out of things to say after 45 seconds because they jump straight to the main event using only the simple past tense. Like, I went there, I did this, it was hard, like this way. To sustain a 2-minute monologue, you must build a backstory. You do this using the past perfect tense. You can do it. You know this structure. Okay, so if you just answer the question, so you will be in a trap. But if you could make a backstory, then you could find it very convenient. The past perfect anchor, what would be the structure? So the past perfect, that is subject and had, and past participle is a grammar of the past perfect before the past. So you are using two structured sentences, and but both in the past. So the earlier past would be that is the latest past would be in past indefinite, and the earlier one would be in the past perfect. By starting your monologue with this structure, you anchor the listener in a time before the main event happened. This adds massive depth to your story and naturally eats up 20-30 seconds of high quality speaking time. Okay, so see the formula, time marker you will be using. Formula, that is the time after using that past time marker, then subject had, past participle, and your main events in simple past. So basic opening, I started a new job last year, it was difficult. And your advanced anchor opening, it would be, prior to starting that new position last year, I had always operated under the assumption that corporate management was easy. Okay, the assumption that corporate management was easy. So I had always operated under the assumption. Actually, I had the prior belief that the corporate management would be very easy. So you are saying that prior to starting the that new position last year that you have actually started in the last year, the position of corporate management. So you had the belief, or you had that sort of understanding, that which is not actually correct. You had the belief that I have always operated under the assumption. You had some sort of guess, okay, that corporate management was easy. I was abruptly proven wrong. The thing is not that easy. So you were telling that so superbly. So I started in a new job last year. It was difficult. So you have uplifted these sentences that prior to starting the new position last year, I had always operated. I had actually I had that sort of belief in my mind, or I had always maintained under this. I have always maintained the belief under the assumption that what corporate management was easy, or you could say operated under the assumption that corporate management was easy. So it seems that it's a little bit difficult structure, but it is not. So you are telling now I was abruptly proven wrong. You are not telling that it was difficult. You are telling I was abruptly proven wrong because I had a different belief earlier. Okay. So a typical IELTS Part 2 QCAR topic question, like describe a time when you had to adapt to a sudden change. You could say, up until that point in my life, before that point or that time in my life, I had never previously encountered severe financial instability. I had always relied on a very predictable monthly salary. Therefore, when the company suddenly filed for bankruptcy, the shock was utterly paralyzing. Okay. So you could notice the mechanism here. Before you even talk about the bankruptcy, you established why it was so shocking by using the past perfect. That you had never encountered this sort of situation or unpredictable way of your financial status. Had always relied. You had always relied. You had never encountered earlier. So that's why it's shocking or it's paralyzing. You said that the shock was utterly paralyzing. So you have prepared the background, or you have prepared the platform to present your idea. So this is how we could make some sort of advanced structure. We can present ourselves that we can handle this advanced language. This is master level storytelling. We use purpose structures to explain why someone does something or what goal their narrative hooks. Use these phrases. Okay, so these are the phrases. And again, I have given you these phrases. The 1, 2, 3. Use these phrases. Use these phrases to open your 2-minute monologue with absolute authority. One is, leading up to that specific moment, I had spent months, leading up to that specific moment, I had spent months meticulously. You know this word meticulously as you are living in Bangladesh. So meticulously preparing the curriculum for my new online course, which is why the sudden influx of international students on launch day felt so overwhelmingly validating. Okay, so influx, so many students, which leading up to that specific moment, I had spent months meticulously preparing the curriculum for my new online course. Okay, so that is what, which is why the sudden influx of international students, a lot of students you found, and you are to welcome a lot of students on launch day felt so overwhelmingly validating. The way actually we are moving towards to begin another batch on 8th of August. So if actually we get sudden influx or a lot of students we could gather on that day, that would be overwhelmingly validating. Yeah, that validates our effort or that structured course. Okay, another way we could see, up until that point in my life, I had never previously encountered. Up until that point in my life, I had never previously encountered what? Such a high stakes, aggressive corporate environment. So being asked to lead the quarterly board meeting was entirely uncharted territory for me. Okay, I have never been in that situation that all on a sudden in the boardroom I am actually being asked to give my presentation like this sort of. Up until that point of my life, in my life, I had never previously encountered, never faced this sort of situation previously, such a high stakes aggressive corporate environment. Okay, so that means I'm forced to speak. So being asked to lead the quarterly board meeting was entirely uncharted, unconventional, unusual to you, territory for me. Okay, another way we could say this sort of phrases we could use. For years, I had harbored this deep desire to. Okay, you are expecting. You have nourished that sort of expectation, deep desire to. Like for years, I had harbored this deep desire to integrate entrepreneurial thinking into my English classrooms, but it was not until I attended that specific conference in Nepal that I finally figured out how to execute the idea. How to focus your sentences together to create a fluid, native sounding story. Okay, by eliminating choppy, robotic sentences, the stammering sound that you use the chop is like we have discussed on that issue that how to avoid choppy sentences. So by eliminating your choppy robotic sentences during your 2-minute monologue, you can do it. So the core linguistic concept of doing so is when telling a long story under pressure, non-native speakers tend to use short robotic sentences connected by and, then, and. Okay, so example, I realized I was lost. I took out my phone. I checked the map. In between, many of the students could say, and I took out of my phone and I checked my map like this way. To achieve a seamless flowing rhythm, essential for a high pronunciation and fluency score, you must use participle clauses. This means turning one of the verbs into an ing or ed form and attaching it to the front of the sentences. We have discussed this in the grammar classes, how to make that participle phrase from complex sentences to simple sentences, right? So by adding the ing form of the verb, so making it participle and participle phrases, we could make it longer sentence, right? So present participle fusion, see, verb, ing, and context, main subject and main verb. So that is the basics, the choppy sentence. I recognize the magnitude of the problem and I immediately called a meeting. Or some of you could avoid that and also. This is a two different sentences. So how could you fuse it? Okay, combined it. Recognizing the magnitude. See, what did I do? Recognize. Say I have just made it participle phrase, making it ing form and make it a phrase. Clause, I have turned the clause into a phrase. So recognizing the magnitude of the problem, I immediately called a team meeting. Okay, I felt completely overwhelmed by workload. I decided to resign. Two different sentences, two different clauses. So we could make it, we could actually, fuse it. We could combine it by making it participle phrase. So the verb would be the ing form. So here feel, that is the feeling completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work. I made the difficult decision to resign. Okay, if you could add and here, it would be a compound sentence. So to make it compound to simple, that is a simple trick by making it participle phrase. You know that. Okay, so I faced an absolute deadline. I worked for 48 hours straight without sleep. How could you make it? Faced with an absolute non-negotiable deadline, yes, you have avoided the subject. You have made it past participle and phrase. Faced with an absolute non-negotiable deadline, just you have made this sentence into this phrase. So there you have avoided the verb, a subject. You have avoided the subject. So this becomes a phrase. Faced with an absolute non-negotiable deadline. So here absolute deadline, and absolute deadline you make it non-negotiable deadline. Okay. I worked for 48 hours straight without sleep. Same sentences, same expression. Just see how could you make it different. I realized that the client was furious. I offered them a full refund. So realizing that the client was absolutely furious, I immediately offered a full refund to salvage the relationship. It's simple. It's not difficult. We have discussed this structure, this transformation of sentences, how to make from complex to simple, compound to simple, how to fuse two independent clauses into one clause, and making a clause, or that is the sentence, into phrases by making it participle phrase. So this is what I have been discussing for last 2 minutes here on this slide. So now learn to start your narrative sentences with these powerful ing verbs, realizing that faced with, you see these two phrases, use when the story shifts because you notice something. Okay, so realizing that the original production deadline was mathematically impossible to meet, I immediately called an emergency meeting with the client to renegotiate the timeline. See, this is a simple sentence. Here we have used this this is not a sentence, it's a phrase. And we have only one subject, and that is a verb. And this becomes one sentence with one clause. That means it's a simple sentence. You might find it that is a complex sentence, but many of the students think that whenever the sentence is longer, it becomes complex. This is not. You can avoid the clause, you can make it phrase, and it will become simple sentence. If a simple sentence requires only one clause, that is one subject, one verb. If you could avoid one the subject of that subordinate clause or another clause into phrase, that will become one clause sentence. One clause sentence represents simple sentence. Okay, faced with, use when you are confronted by a challenge in your story. You could use this, faced with. Like faced with a sudden and severe budget cut halfway through the academic year, our department had to completely innovate our approach to delivering the curriculum. In part 3, let's move towards part 3. Absolute statements sound immature. You must learn to hedge. Though I have already discussed how to make it nuanced, how to hedge it. Your opinion using specific models and adverbs to sound like an objective analyst. The trap of sweeping generalization. If an examiner asks, does money change people? If you give any definite answer, then you will be sounding like very basic speaker. Does money change people? It varies, right? It varies. A basic speaker says, yes, money makes everyone greedy. This is a fatal error in part 3. It is an absolute statement, and absolute statements are rarely true. It cannot be. So life changes, situation changes, philosophy changes. It cannot be absolute. Nothing is absolute under the sun. Nothing is absolute in this world. So absolute answer would be silly. It would be a fatal error to make that sort of absolute answer. So how could you say that? How does that native speaker, or how do the native speakers use this sort of hedging? The linguistic tool of softening a claim so that it becomes impossible to argue against, while simultaneously using highly advanced vocabulary. The hedging engine. Though we have already discussed, now this is the last class of our this speaking course. That's why I have brought all the learnings in one that session. So hedging engine, how will you make it? Subject and your modals, tentative verb and adverb of degree, verb and abstract noun. See, social media ruins teenagers' mental health. Okay, so this is the absolute answer. You have given the statement, so it cannot be. How could we make it? Unregulated exposure to social media trends to invariably foster a sense of psychological inadequacy among adolescents, among the young people, right? Among the teenagers, you have used the word adolescents, same the synonymous word of teenagers. So you see, it's not that social media actually always actually ruin teenagers' mental health. It depends on the condition of unregulated exposure to social media tends to invariably a sense of psychological inadequacy among adolescents. An extreme opinion: video games make children violent. Right. So this is extreme. Video games make children violent. How could you actually hedge it? Prolonged exposure to unmoderated digital media can arguably be attributed to a desensitization to real world consequences among young demographics. Okay? Learn this combination. They allow you to give strong opinion without sounding arrogant or overly simplistic. Can arguably be attributed to or is largely indicative of. Use this phrase when actually you are explaining the cause of a massive societal problem, like the rapid decline in traditional community structures can arguably be attributed to the hyper individualistic nature of modern corporate culture. Okay. And this number 2 is largely indicative to when will you use it? কখন use করবেন এটা? Use when explaining what a trend or behavior shows us about society. The sudden surge means rise. The sudden surge in consumers purchasing sustainable, eco-friendly products is largely indicative of a broader generational shift in environmental consciousness. তাই না? এখন আমরা যেটা ইকো-ফ্রেন্ডলি প্রোডাক্টগুলো ব্যবহার করি তার মানে হচ্ছে এটা একটা ইন্ডিকেট করে, ইজ লার্জলি ইন্ডিকেটিভ অফ ব্রডার জেনারেশনাল শিফট। একটা জেনারেশনের মধ্যে একটা প্রজন্মের মধ্যে একটা শিফট দেখা যাচ্ছে ইন এনভায়রনমেন্টাল কনসিয়াসনেস, সচেতনতা, আমাদের পরিবেশ সম্পর্কে সচেতনতাটা এটা ইন্ডিকেট করছে। How to define abstract concepts on the fly when asked about complex ideas like success or responsibility? You must define the terms before you answer the question. ওকে, একটু লিঙ্গুইস্টিক কনসেপ্টটা একটু দেখে নেন। এটা আমরা পার্ট 3-তে অ্যান্সার করে থাকি। এই ধরনের এগুলো স্ট্রাকচার যদি আমি ব্যবহার করি, you will be asked highly philosophical questions. How has the definition of success changed? যে আমাদের সফলতার যে ডেফিনেশনটা এটা কিভাবে পরিবর্তন হচ্ছে, এটা ফলোয়িং দ্য জেনারেশন অর ফলোয়িং দ্য অ্যাডভান্সমেন্ট অফ সিভিলাইজেশন, লাইক দিস ওয়ে। এটা খুবই থিওরিটিক্যাল এবং ফিলসফিক্যাল একটা কোয়েশ্চেন, তাই না? সো আপনি যদি সরাসরি এটা বলে দেন, ইফ ইউ জাস্ট স্টার্ট লিস্টিং এক্সাম্পল, ইউ সাউন্ড disorganized. Native level academics use appositive phrases like a noun phrase placed immediately after another noun to define or explain it. নাউনটা বললেন, ওটাকে আবার এক্সপ্লেন করতে হয়। সো এটাকে অ্যাপোজিটিভ স্ট্রাকচার বলে। This allows you to pause the sentence, define the concept on your own terms, and then finish your thought. Like you see, use an abstract concept, that is success, then make a comma. What does it mean? Then you are telling that. So like this way. The basic sentence, see it, success has changed because people want peace now. Okay. So how could you make it? By making the appositive definition. The definition, you are telling it. You are defining it. Success. fundamentally redefined in the modern era as a attainment of mental peace rather than extreme wealth, has drastically altered how my generation chooses their careers. ওকে, কিভাবে তারা এখন ক্যারিয়ারটাকে চুজ করছে। একটা সময় টাকা ইনকাম করাটাকে অনেকেই খুব বেশি সাকসেসের ইয়েটা দেখতো, সেটা যে পরিবর্তন হয়েছে এখন মেন্টাল পিসের ব্যাপারটা, হ্যাঁ, মেন্টাল স্ট্রেস যেখানে কম সেখানে সেই জবটাকে চুজ করে টু এনজয় দ্য কোয়ালিটি অফ লাইফ রাদার এনজয়িং দ্য এক্সট্রিম ওয়েলথ, রাইট? সো এটাই বলছেন, হ্যাজ ড্রাস্টিক্যালি অল্টার্ড হাউ মাই জেনারেশন চুজেস দেয়ার ক্যারিয়ার। যেভাবে আমার জেনারেশন ক্যারিয়ারটা চুজ করছে, তাদের চয়েস দেখে এটা বলা যায় যে তারা এখন মেন্টাল পিসটাকে বেশি প্রাধান্য দেয়। ওকে, এবার গ্লোবাল ট্যুরিজম নিয়ে যদি টপিক, এটাকে কিভাবে বলতে পারি আমরা? গ্লোবাল ট্যুরিজম আর ডিরেক্ট বাই প্রোডাক্ট অফ চিপার এভিয়েশন টেকনোলজি হ্যাজ আনফর্চুনেটলি commercialized many sacred historical sites, রাইট? সো অনেক যেগুলো পবিত্র যে ঐতিহাসিক জায়গাগুলো সেগুলোকে কি করেছে, কমার্শিয়ালাইজ করে ফেলছে। হ্যাঁ, সো সেই যে গ্লোবাল ট্যুরিজম, যেটা আসলে গ্লোবাল ট্যুরিজম হওয়ার কারণে, গ্লোবালি ট্যুরিজমটাকে এনকারেজ করার কারণে এটা কি হয়েছে, চিপার এভিয়েশন টেকনোলজি এটা ইউজ করা হচ্ছে, এবং যার ফলে এটা খুবই আনফর্চুনেট, যেটা অনেক স্যাক্রেড হিস্ট্রিক্যাল সাইটসগুলো আছে। ধরেন আপনি আপনার বিভিন্ন উপাসনালয়গুলোতে, ধরেন আপনি সেটা যে কোনো জায়গায় যে কোনো ধর্মেরই হতে পারে, মক্কা মদিনা, সেই জায়গাগুলো যদি এখন কমার্শিয়ালাইজড হয়ে যায়, তাহলে সেই বিষয়টার যে পবিত্রতাটা, ঐতিহাসিকভাবে পবিত্রতার যে বিষয়গুলো, সেগুলো নষ্ট হয়ে যাচ্ছে, এরকম একটা যে কথা বলছেন সেটাকে বলছেন গ্লোবাল ইকোনমি আর ডিরেক্ট বাই প্রোডাক্ট অফ চিপার এভিয়েশন টেকনোলজি হ্যাজ আনফর্চুনেটলি কমার্শিয়ালাইজ। এটা দুঃখজনকভাবে এটা কি বাণিজ্যিকরণ করে ফেলেছে মেনি স্যাক্রেড হিস্ট্রিক্যাল সাইটস। ওকে, the definition frameworks use these phrases directly between your two commas to frame the topic exactly how you want to talk about it. An inherently subjective concept. Use কখন ব্যবহার করবেন, এই যে ব্র্যাকেটের মধ্যে এখানে আমি লিখে দিয়েছি, এটা তখনই ব্যবহার করবেন অ্যাবাউট হ্যাপিনেস, আর্ট, সাকসেস অর বিউটি। ওকে, এই ধরনের সিচুয়েশনে এটা ব্যবহার করতে পারেন। যেমন ট্রু হ্যাপিনেস, এটাকে ডিফাইন করছেন, মনে করেন আপনাকে বললো হোয়াট ইজ ট্রু হ্যাপিনেস, আপনি এটাকে ডিফাইন করতে গেলে এই ফ্রেজটা ব্যবহার করেন। ট্রু হ্যাপিনেস, অ্যান ইনহারেন্টলি সাবজেক্টিভ কনসেপ্ট ক্যান নেভার বি অ্যাকুরেটলি মেজার্ড বাই ন্যাশনাল ইকোনমিক ডেটা। তাই না? এটা কখনোই এটা অ্যাকুরেটলি মেজার করা যাবে না, পরিমাপ করা যাবে না বাই ন্যাশনাল ইকোনমিক ডেটা, যে জাতীয় অর্থনৈতিক যে গ্রোথ, এটা নিয়ে এটা কখনোই বলা যাবে না ট্রু হ্যাপিনেস। ওকে, প্যারাডাইম শিফট, দ্যাট এই প্যারাডাইম শিফট এটা এর আগে আমরা দেখেছি, সেটা আরও আছে ক্লাসে, প্রিভিয়াস ক্লাসে, সেটা কখন ব্যবহার করবেন? ইউজ ওয়েন টকিং অ্যাবাউট ম্যাসিভ চেঞ্জেস ইন টেকনোলজি, লাইক the integration of AI in classrooms, a paradigm shift that fundamentally alters the role of the teacher, requires immediate legislative regulation. তাই না? এখন আইনগত একটা রেগুলেশন দরকার। A direct byproduct of, একটু আগে ইউজ দেখলেন এটা, so the modern epidemic of digital fatigue, ডিজিটাল যে রিসোর্স টেকনোলজির কারণে আমাদের যে অবসাদ, যে ফ্যাটিকটা হয়ে যায়, যে মেন্টালি আমরা ড্রেইন হয়ে যাচ্ছি, এটা কি ডিরেক্ট বাই, এটা কমা দিয়েছে, দেখেন কমা দিয়ে এখানে অ্যাপোজিটিভ ইউজ করতেছি। এটা বলতে কি বোঝাচ্ছে, ডিজিটাল ফ্যাটিক বলতে কি বোঝাচ্ছে সেটা আমি এক্সপ্লেন করছি। আর ডিরেক্ট বাই প্রোডাক্ট অফ কনস্ট্যান্ট কানেক্টিভিটি, হ্যাঁ, কনস্ট্যান্ট কানেক্টিভিটি, সেটাই বলছি ডিজিটাল ফ্যাটিক, মানে ডিরেক্ট বাই প্রোডাক্ট অফ কনস্ট্যান্ট কানেক্টিভিটি। সারাক্ষণ আমরা 24/7 দেখেন যারা কল সেন্টারে কাজ করে বা এই ব্যাপারে ডিজিটাল ফ্যাটিকটা হয়ে যায়। ইজ সিভিয়ারলি ডিমিনিশিং ওয়ার্কপ্লেস ক্রিয়েটিভিটি, তাই না? এখানে ওয়ার্কপ্লেসে আর কোনো ক্রিয়েটিভিটি, চিন্তা করার স্কোপই তো নাই, শুধু তাকে অ্যাটেন্ড করতে হয়, কোনো কিছু চিন্তার কিছু নাই, শুধু সিস্টেমকে চালিয়ে যেতে হয়, একটা প্রোটোকলকে মেনটেন করতে হয়, যা আছে তাই শুধু রিপিট, এখানে কোনো ক্রিয়েটিভিটির জায়গাটা থাকছে না। The syntactic domino effect, the key to demonstrating absolute fluency and sustained grammatical control is to logically connect multiple consequences without using the word and. the trap of ant and them. When asked to explain the consequences of an action in part 3, কিভাবে আপনি এটা কনসিকোয়েন্সের ফলাফল যদি জানতে চায় যেটা রেজাল্ট বা এটা কি, বেসিক স্পিকার্স বিল্ড আ চেইন লাইক দিস, the city built more roads, so more people bought cars, and then traffic got worse and pollution went up. So এটা আপনি কিভাবে আরো চেঞ্জ করতে পারেন, দিস ইজ কনভারসেশনাল, বাট এটা আসলে একটা কনভারসেশনাল মতো হয়ে গেল, বাট ইট রেস্ট্রিক্টস ইয়োর গ্রামার স্কোর, কারণ গ্রামারে আপনি একই রকমের গ্রামার এখানে ইউজ করেছেন, ভ্যারিয়েশন তো নাই। ইউ মাস্ট লার্ন টু বিল্ড আ সিমলেস ক্যাসকেড অফ লজিক ইউজিং অ্যাডভান্স রিলেটিভ ক্লজেস, আপনি এখানে কজ অ্যান্ড এফেক্টের ব্যাপারটা নিয়ে আসেন, অ্যান্ড পার্টিসিপল কানেক্টার্স, কারণ আপনাকে জানতে চেয়েছে আপনার কনসিকুয়েন্সেস, তো কনসিকুয়েন্সেস জানার মতো ব্যাপারটা তো এখানে নেই, এখানে সেই লিঙ্কিং ডিভাইস বা সেই রকমের আপনি ক্লজ পার্টিসিপল কিছুই ব্যবহার করতেছেন না, কানেক্টর ব্যবহার করতেছেন না, কানেক্টর ছাড়া আপনি কিভাবে করবেন, সাবঅর্ডিনেট কনজাংশন তো লাগবে এখানে। সো সেই জায়গায় আপনি কি করতে পারেন, এইভাবে বলতে পারেন, a significant portion of the population is abandoning long-term literature, thereby you have used যে কনসিকুয়েন্স জানতে যাচ্ছে, তাই না, তাহলে আপনাকে একটু ব্যবহার করতে, thereby diminishing their active vocabulary, which invariably leads to a societal inability to articulate complex emotions. বুঝতে পেরেছেন? সো এইভাবে আমরা এগুলোকে আপলিফট করতে পারি। ইউনিভার্সিটিজ আর হেভিলি রেজিং দেয়ার টিউশন ফিস, এটাকে আপনি এভাবে বলতে পারেন, ইউনিভার্সিটি আর ড্রাস্টিক্যালি রেজিং দেয়ার টিউশন ফিস ইয়ার ওভার ইয়ার, দেয়ার বাই, এই যে আপনি এখানে তার ইম্প্যাক্টটা বলছেন, তাই না, দেয়ার বাই এক্সেলারেটিং দ্য স্টুডেন্ট ডেট ক্রাইসিস, আরো ত্বরান্বিত করতেছে, মানে স্টুডেন্টরা ঋণ নিয়ে পড়ালেখা করার যে প্রবণতা সেই বিষয়টা, which invariably leads to a generation delaying major life milestones like purchasing a home, তাই না, এটা হচ্ছে ইউনিভার্সিটির কারণে, এটা এটার ইম্প্যাক্টটা বলছেন। ওকে, সো এভাবে আপনার অনেক ধরনের স্যাম্পল আপনাকে দেওয়া আছে, যেমন থার্ড কন্ডিশনাল ইউজ করে আমরা কিভাবে এটাকে আরো আপলিফট করতে পারি সেই জায়গাগুলো। So how to discuss alternative realities or future possibilities by upgrading standard if clause into formal native level inverted conditional. Okay, in part 3 the examiner will frequently ask you to imagine the future or look at the past and imagine a different outcome. So basic level of sentences would be like this way, and how would we make it in different level. Okay, so formula হচ্ছে আপনার future hypothetical, এটা ইউজ করবেন, where subject to plus base form subject would could verb formula past regret, যেটা আমরা এর আগে ইউজ করেছি, অথবা আমরা ইউজ করতে পারি এরপর আরো একটা had subject past, এভাবে ইউজ করতে পারি, তাই না, had I the riches, or had I the wings of a bird, like this way. If society embraced new renewable energy, we could reverse climate change. So were society to genuinely embrace renewable energy, যদি এটা করতে চায়, we could theoretically reverse the trajectory of climate change. দেখেন এখানে সেন্টেন্স স্ট্রাকচারটা আপনি আরেক রকম করে প্রেজেন্ট করলেন। Were we to completely abandon physical currency, centralized financial institutions would gain unprecedented surveillance over our daily lives. So এভাবে where they are had দিয়ে দেখেন এখানে সেন্টেন্স একটা এখানে দেয়া আছে, had we fully comprehend the magnet, এইরকম একটা স্ট্রাকচার, অথবা আমরা ব্যবহার করতে পারি should this trend persist unchecked, অথবা ব্যবহার করতে পারি were we to completely abandon, যদি এটা করতে চাই এভাবে আমরা স্ট্রাকচার ইউজ করতে পারি। তাহলে এই সেকেন্ডটা দেখেন, এটা তো এক নম্বরটা তো আলোচনা হলো, should this trend persist unchecked, the division of wealth in this country will soon reach in irreversible and catastrophic levels. অথবা had দিয়ে যদি আমরা বলি had we fully comprehended, had ইউজ হয়েছে, এখানে কিন্তু past participle ইউজ হবে, had we fully comprehend হলে স্ট্রাকচার ভুল হয়ে যাবে। comprehended the magnitude, আমরা যে করতে পারতাম, the magnitude of the plastic pollution, এই যে প্লাস্টিকের যে পলিউশনটা যদি আমরা আগে থেকে অনুমান করতে পারতাম, পলিউশন ক্রাইসিস 2 decades ago, 2 দশক আগে যদি আমরা এটাকে কম্প্রিহেন্ড করতে পারতাম, we would not be facing the collapse of marine ecosystems today. আজকে যে সমুদ্রে আমাদের যে ইকোসিস্টেম যেটা নষ্ট হয়ে গেছে বা ওখানে মাছের জীবন যে দুর্বিষহ হয়ে গেছে, তারা ওখানে কলাপস করতেছে এই যে প্লাস্টিক পলিউশনের কারণে। সেটা আমরা যদি 2 দশক আগে এটাকে উপলব্ধি করতে পারতাম, কম্প্রিহেন্ড করতে পারতাম, বুঝতে পারতাম, তাহলে এটা হতো না। উই উড নট বি ফেসিং, আমরা এরকমটা ফেস করতাম না। এরকম সিচুয়েশনে আমরা এগুলো স্ট্রাকচার ব্যবহার করব। Okay, look at the stamina you have built today. You are no longer just memorizing vocabulary words, you are architecting language by mastering the time shift. You showed the ability to analyze your own evolution in casual conversation. By welding the past perfect and participle clauses, you turn basic to 2-minute monologue into gripping cinematic stories. When you walk into an IELTS exam, an interview, or a boardroom, you will no longer fear the silence. You now have the structural blueprints to build an answer out of the thin air, control the pacing of the narrative, and command the attention of everyone listening. আজকে আপনারা সকালবেলায় যারা প্র্যাকটিস করেছেন, যে ডায়ালগ আমরা করেছি, সেখানে আপনারা দেখেছেন আপনারা এখন আর আগের মতো সেই ভয়টা আপনাদের নেই। ইউ ক্যান টেক ইনিশিয়েটিভ, ইউ ক্যান begin the conversation. You could start all on a sudden to address questions, right? So anxiety in spoken English comes from the illusion of perfection. আমাদের একটা ইলিউশন থাকে যে আমাকে পারফেক্ট হতে হবে, গ্রামারে পারফেক্ট হতে হবে, আমাকে প্রোনাউন্সিয়েশনে পারফেক্ট হতে হবে, আমাকে ভোকাবুলারি পারফেক্ট হতে হবে। এই একটা ইলিউশন আমাদের থাকে, যেই কারণে আমরা নিজেদেরকে থামিয়ে দিই। সো ইউ ফিয়ার দ্যাট ইফ ইউ মেক আ গ্রামেটিক্যাল মিস্টেক ইউ উইল বি জাস্ট, এটার জন্য আমরা থেমে যাই। সো ইউ নাও পজেস স্ট্রাকচারস, আপনার কিন্তু স্ট্রাকচার আছে, আপনি ইনভার্সন জানেন, পার্টিসিপল জানেন, হেজিং জানেন, সব কিছু জানা আছে, that native speakers struggle to use in daily life. You do not need to be perfect. Trust me, you do not need to be perfect. Just keep your airflow moving. You just need to practice speaking in English. You only need to be structured. স্ট্রাকচার গুলো কি রকম, এটাকে সাজাই নেন এবং আপনাকে প্র্যাকটিস করেন এই স্ট্রাকচার বেস করে। When your mind goes blank, do not panic. Rely on the architecture you have built. Trust the frameworks. The English language is now your tool, not your master. এটা আপনাকে কন্ট্রোল করবে না। যখন আপনি ভয়টাকে বাদ দিয়ে ফেলতে পারবেন, চলে যাবে অটোমেটিক্যালি যখন প্র্যাকটিস করবেন। স্ট্রাকচারে আপনি জানেন, আপনি যদি এই আর্কিটেকচারটা যদি মাথায় নিতে পারেন, তাহলে কিন্তু আপনার ইংলিশ ফ্লো কেউ আটকাতে পারবে না। সো ফ্লুয়েন্সি ইজ আ মাসল, ইফ ইউ ডু নট ট্রেন ইট, ইট উইল অ্যাট্রফি। ওকে, অ্যাট্রফি, এটা আসবে না, এটা আপনাকে মানে সফলতা দিবে না। ট্রফি মানে ট্রফি নিয়ে আসবে না। স্টার্টিং টুমরো, দিস ইজ ইয়োর ডেইলি রুটিন। আজকে তো আমরা শেষ করলাম, এখন আপনার ডেইলি রুটিন কেমন হবে, আপনি কিভাবে চলবেন, হ্যাঁ, আপনার এইসব মেনটেন কিভাবে করবেন। সো ইনপুট ফেজ 15 মিনিট, রিড one highly analytical article from the Economist, Atlantic বা যে কোনো নিউজ পেপার হতে পারে, ডেইলি স্টার হতে পারে। আমি আপনাদেরকে একটু বলতে চাই যে অনলাইনে তো আমাদের ইকোনমিক্স এগুলো পাওয়া যায়, হ্যাঁ, বা ব্রিটিশ আর্টিকেলস ডেইলিসগুলো পাওয়া যায়। সো ওগুলো একটু আমরা পড়ার চেষ্টা করব, ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজগুলো আর একটু আপলিফটেড করার চেষ্টা করব। বাংলাদেশের ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ ইংলিশটা তো আছেই, সেটা আমরা দেখতে পারি। একটু বিদেশি নিউজ পেপারগুলো কীভাবে তারা আর্টিকেল করে, লিখে, তাহলে আপনাদের স্ট্যান্ডার্ডটা আরও বেটার হবে। নেটিভ যে একটা কান্ট্রি থেকে যদি আপনি একটা ডেইলি নিউজ আপনি দেখেন, ফলো করেন প্রতিদিনই, তাহলে আপনার কনফিডেন্সটা আরও বেটার হয়ে যাবে। ডু নট রিড ফর দ্য স্টোরি, রিড টু স্টিল দেয়ার গ্রামেটিক্যাল স্ট্রাকচার। হ্যাঁ, ওই মানে গল্প পড়ে গল্প জানা শোনার জন্য না, আমাদের উদ্দেশ্যটা কি থাকবে, আমরা স্ট্রাকচারটা দেখার চেষ্টা করব কীভাবে তারা স্ট্রাকচার করছে। হান ফর অ্যাপোজিটিভস, এই যে অ্যাপোজিটিভ শিখালাম আজকে, অ্যাপোজিটিভ কীভাবে ডিফাইন করে, অ্যান্ড ক্যাজুয়াল চেঞ্জ। ওকে, দ্য শ্যাডোইং ফেজ 10 মিনিটস, এটা করবেন। যে কোনো টেড টক আপনি নিতে পারেন, সেখানে পজ দ্য ভিডিও এভরি 30 সেকেন্ডস, রিপিট দ্য স্পিকার সেন্টেন্স এক্স্যাক্টলি অ্যাজ। আমরা কিন্তু এর আগে 10 সেকেন্ড করে প্র্যাকটিস করেছি, আপনার যেহেতু আমরা এই করছি, এটা আপনাদের আলটিমেটলি এটা 30 সেকেন্ড শুনে তারপর পজ দিয়ে আপনি আবার বলবেন সেন্টেন্স এক্স্যাক্টলি অ্যাজ দে সেড ইট, ম্যাচিং দেয়ার ইন্টোনেশন, স্পিড অ্যান্ড কনফিডেন্স। Okay, the abstract output 5 minutes. Look at the random object of or concept. Speak out loud for 2 minutes using the prep framework. Class 18 আপনাকে দেয়া আছে। Okay, so force your brain to generate logic on the fly. 20 classes ago, many of you were afraid, to speak a full sentence in public. You worried about your accents. your vocabulary and your memory. Today you are executing inverted conditionals, dismantling complex philosophical arguments, and commanding the intellectual space of the room. Mr. Rashid and Rahat also had that sort of privilege to present their dialogue presentation today, and we have experienced. They have executed the structures, and they have also presented their dialect presentation for 5 minutes. Okay, so that was their task. You came here to learn English for an exam, or for an admission, or for a job. But what you actually learned was how to think critically, structure your thoughts fearlessly, and articulate your identity to the world. Being your instructor has been an adventurous journey with you through the course. Today we are officially concluding this journey. Now you are all set to go out there and speak with confidence. And it was my privilege to conduct this course with you. If you have any question, you can ask. And thank you very much. I'm
Thank you,
so
sir.
happy. I'm really grateful to all of you that you trusted me and you joined the course. Thank you very much. I'm concluding our today's session and concluding the our speaking course, online English speaking course. I'm concluding our session and the course here today with that note of gratitude and thanks. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.